What's up, good people? It's your brother, your uncle, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor coming to you with the Friday live stream. I am super pumped, super excited, feeling a heck of a lot better. If you caught the last stream, you know that your boy was dealing with the big C word for the fourth or fifth time. It is what it is in our household. We got a little one in school, so it happens. So it's all good. But for today's live stream, I sound a lot better. Hopefully that's coming across. And we are going to talk about how you can start your podcast in 2023. I am excited because podcast, in my personal opinion, and if you're just now tuning in, welcome. My name is Marvin, your brother, your uncle, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor. I am a real estate content creator and coach. And so if you enjoy content like this and you are not currently with my favorite brokerage at the moment, eXp Realty, and you'd like to have a conversation on how you can use video, podcast, content creation in general to grow your business in the new year, I'd love to coach you absolutely for free if you're interested in joining. So please book a call by clicking the link in the show notes of this podcast. I am so excited for this video and the opportunity that I've been able to generate from it and what I know you can do as well. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to talk about why podcasts are the next big opportunity. So think about it right now. Think about your favorite podcast, if you even listen to podcasts. Hopefully you do, because content right now and the way that it is packaged and distributed, it comes to us in a number of different ways. Video, of course, is the primary, but there are times where video isn't super convenient. For example, if you are in the car, you cannot watch, you can't listen as intently to a video as you can if you're sitting down watching it. So podcasts have really been an amazing opportunity for a lot of creators because it allows us to get our voice out there, talk about the things that we are excited and passionate about. And if we're not super comfortable being on camera, it's one way to still be able to put yourself out there and share your gift with the world. Because I truly believe that we all have a gift, we all have a voice. And as of this recording, we are just shy, for example, of 600 subscribers on our YouTube channel. And I'm excited about that because we're growing on a regular basis. And that's 600 people. If I was in a room with 600 people, I'd be pretty pumped because those are a lot of freaking individuals that are here to hear what I have to say or see what I have to say. So for me, video was a muscle that I had to work as far as being comfortable on video, and you may not be there, and that's okay. But I think a major opportunity for those of us that are a little camera shy is to dive straight into podcast. And I'm going to load you up with all of the information, tips, tricks, and strategies in this particular episode that you will be able to move tomorrow to get started on your podcast. And I'm excited to see what you cook up. All right, so we're going to talk about, moving right along here, we're going to talk about how it's important to say a lot without saying a lot. So with podcast, you are able to get away with a lot more as far as if you are the type of person that really likes to deep dive into a subject matter. YouTube, we're all about, folks on YouTube, content on YouTube is all about, short-term consumption, getting to the point immediately, and then, ultimately giving the audience what it was that they came to get from you. But with podcasts, you have the ability to really deep dive, take your time, really get surgical with the content that you are sharing about, or the idea, or the topic, or whatever it is. So for example, some of the most popular podcasts out there are literally 2 and 3 hours long. So that just goes to show how you have an amazing opportunity to say a whole lot, but it's important to realize that you cannot ramble. So when you have a podcast, if you decide to go that route, think of it as an opportunity for individuals to read the book that you have to share, for example, on audiobooks. So if you're like me and a lot of people, it's tough sitting and reading a book for a given period of time. It's really tough, right? So audiobooks are an opportunity for us to consume the information from that author without necessarily sitting and reading that book. So think of your podcast as your way to get into the audiobook game, for example, and share information that's going to help the individual, the end listener, learn something new or take away a nugget that they weren't aware was out there in the world, or to just flat out entertain people. So there are really popular podcasts that are like your murder mysteries, where the people on the podcast are literally acting like characters in a suspense movie or whatever, and they are literally going through the storyline. Then you have other podcasts like your Joe Rogans, which are more conversational pieces. That's more along the lines of the type of podcast that I do, where I talk to other individuals. If you're watching the YouTube channel right now, you see my podcast in the background here, the Equity Podcast. Please be sure to look it up on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe. But my conversations in my podcast tend to be, if it's not me solo dolo like I'm doing right now, it's an opportunity for me to learn from some of the brightest minds in my industry. My podcast is geared towards real estate investing and real estate agents. So I bring individuals on my platform, and they don't charge me to get on my platform. And I learn more about what makes them tick and what makes them successful in the thing that they're doing, right? So for you, you have an ocean of options as far as what type of podcast that you want to create. But my suggestion would be to make sure that you are saying a lot without saying a whole lot when you're doing your podcast. So for example, for me, when I have my guest podcast, I tend to try to stay under 1 hour. I personally don't have it in me to go 2 or 3 hours like your Joe Rogans and other podcasts out there, but that might be your vibe. And if you're not able to necessarily go solo dolo, maybe you and another real estate agent, especially if you have maybe two opposite stories as far as what got you into the business, or you're a real estate investor, whatever the case is, people tend to like to talk or see two different people or more, because you get to get varying perspectives on the subject matter that's being discussed. So don't think about a podcast as a one linear way that you have to do it. The sky's the limit. You can do your podcast however. So for me, I go solo dolo because I'm comfortable talking. I'm able to convey or articulate my thoughts and whatnot in my stream of consciousness to an end audience. For yourself, it may be a little bit different. So if you're not super comfortable, maybe partnering with someone else where your strengths are their weaknesses and vice versa, or you're on opposing ends of an opinion specific to the real estate industry. So you have the ability to really rock out in any way, shape, form, or fashion that works for you when you have a podcast, and you can go for as long as you comfortably can, because people know when they are watching a podcast or listening to a podcast that they're not going to just consume information in 10 minutes or less like they're watching YouTube or a TV show or something like that. They know. And you have to trust and believe that when an individual is listening to you, they're tapped into you for a reason. They want to hear what you have to say for as long as you have to say it. But you got to be careful to make sure that you are being very concise in what you're saying. You're getting to the point. You're moving the conversation along from subject to subject, and the rest is history. So I think that is really, really important to make sure that you're saying a lot without saying a whole lot. So meaning, give them what they came for. Say what you're going to say. And this is a hack from a communications major, by the way. But in business and in content that's created, my thought process is always tell them what I'm going to say what I said I was going to say, and then follow up by completing what it was that I said that I was going to say. And it might sound like I'm saying the same thing three times, but no, I'm not. I'm telling the audience, you as the listener or the viewer, what I'm going to discuss. For example, we're talking about a podcast. I'm going to say what it is that I'm discussing, aka we're going to deep dive into the conversation about a podcast. And then I close the loop, if you will, by telling them what I just said. So I'm kind of encapsulating everything into one concise package by answering those three things. Saying what I'm going to say, saying it, and then telling them what I just said, right? All right, so if you're getting value from this, please make sure that you smash the like button if you're watching this on YouTube. This is our Friday live podcast. Super excited for you to be joining us today. So now we're going to talk about what is the most important gear to start as it relates to a podcast. For me, I would tell you that you literally could start a podcast, and I'm talking about a really nice looking visual podcast. And I'm going to tell you what that means versus audio podcast for under $200. You can ball out and go for the high end stuff that you see on places like, again, Joe Rogan, The Breakfast Club, Earn Your Leisure, things of that nature. But everybody's situation and budget may not allow them to really spend a lot of money, right? For me, my podcast is specific and strategically a lead generating podcast, meaning that I'm a real estate coach and I'm a content creator. So I know that there are other individuals out there that are in real estate, either as investors or agents, that want to learn how to create content like this that looks pretty cool and clear, and my audio hopefully sounds really good. There is a very strategic way that I put this together, but I'm giving away the sauce right now so that you can do the same. And I'm going to share all of the gear that I have that I use to make this podcast in the links below. Okay. It's going to be an Amazon affiliates link. So if you want to support the channel and you get value from the content your brother, your uncle, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor puts out on a regular basis, click the Amazon links for all of the gear that I use. I literally sourced the best prices on them. And again, you have everything that you'll need to be able to start your podcast in 2023 because you got a voice and I want to hear what y'all have to say out there. So the most important gear to start, and I'm going to share my screen right now, is going to be as follows. So we're going to jump right into some of the gear that I think you would want to start with on day one. And then I'm going to tell you in the remainder of this video how you can distribute your podcast 100% free like I do using a platform that I've been using for many, 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 many years. So I'm excited for that. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is your audio. All right. So I feel like audio is more important than video, not just because it's podcasts and most of us listen to podcasts, but you do also have the ability to watch podcasts, and we're going to talk about that. But audio, if the video is janky, but the audio is on point, 9 times out of 10, your listener is going to stick around and hear what you have to say. But if the video looks good, but the audio is janky, well, more than likely, you're not going to maintain that person's attention for long enough for them to hear what you have to say, and they're going to bounce and go on to the next podcast. So this is a great mic that you can use. This is the mic that I personally use for this podcast, and it is the Blue Yeti USB microphone for PC, Mac, and gaming. This particular microphone, I have used this for years. It has been amazing. If you like the audio, you like how this sounds, this is the microphone that I use to create the content that I create from an audio standpoint. I also use this microphone for my everyday Zoom calls with clients, and I feel like it just really punches up the quality. I know that my clients hear me crystal clear when I'm going through, a listing appointment, a virtual listing appointment, or they reach out to me for whatever. I'm a big fan of hopping on a quick Zoom call with them and talking through my microphone because it just conveys professionalism in what it is that we're doing. So you have the ability, it's just $100 here. Currently it's on sale. This mic has been out for a while and it's got a whole bunch of ratings. It's got over 31,000 ratings to be exact. So I love that. And you can buy this today by clicking the link in the description of this podcast. And if you are listening to it on your favorite audio platform, just check the show notes and you'll see it here. But I like the Blue Yeti microphone because it is a really good starter microphone. There are way more expensive microphones out there. A lot of, if you see, again, popular TV shows or talk shows and radio, the number one mic that most people use are the Shure, Shure. And I'll link that in the description of this video if you want to go that route and go super high end because you're a baller. But for your everyday podcast that you want to make sure that the audio is right and tight and you don't have a lot of money to spend on it, this mic here has been amazing for me, and I've used it, again, several years. The ratings are super important to me, and the fact that it's a USB mic means that it can plug directly into your laptop or your MacBook. So you can, out of the gate, create that podcast using this microphone. You don't have to do anything fancy schmancy with it. It's plug and play, and you're able to use it out of the gate. So this is where you're going to want to definitely focus on as your primary microphone to start as a podcast. There's going to be the Blue Yeti microphone all day. I highly recommend this. I love it. It has not given me any issues whatsoever. You're going to want to make sure that you're using it for a actual laptop, Windows or MacBook or whatever the case is, or a regular PC. All right, so the next thing that I want to show you guys is another option and another item that you're going to need as a podcast content creator, and that is lighting. And you may say to yourself, Marvin, I'm doing a podcast. Why in the world would I need to have good lighting? Well, that's because I don't recommend just doing audio podcasts. Of course, if you're not super comfortable being on camera, things of that nature, just remember that at some point, if you consider yourself an entrepreneur, someone that wants to build a real business, people are going to have to see your face. Okay. There's no way around that, unfortunately. So unless you just have a multi-billion-dollar company or something like that, like Jeff Bezos, but most of us, especially if you're in the real estate space, people are going to want to see who it is that they're dealing with. So for my podcast, lighting is very, very key. I have a light off camera here that I leverage for my content, especially when it's evening time or after dark. That gives me a really, really nice, light. It makes me look really, really good on camera. But I also will say, also be sure to lean on natural light. So in my studio here, I positioned the camera and everything closer to a window because as of this recording right now, it's daytime. It's just after 2 p.m. here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I have good natural light coming in on me as is. But if that was not the case, then having a good ring light like this one here, and again, I'm going to put the link to all of this stuff in the description. This is only $42, and it gives you some really good lighting here, as what we see in the picture here. It's got 375 ratings. It's nearly 5 out of 5. It's 4.3 out of 5. So that's awesome. And it gives you the ability as well, if you use, social media, for example, and you want to record yourself for social media while you're recording content for your video podcast, or you want to take a clip or something like that and use it on the gram or TikTok or whatever, it also has a holster that you can put your smartphone on. So this is a great option here. It's not expensive at all, $40. Again, it's all about investing in your business, right? These are all, if you're using it, and double check with your CPA, but these are all items that if you're purchasing it for your business, well, the question of being able to write this stuff off is kind of a no-brainer, right? So I want to show you guys that what we just looked at. This is the ring light here. If you're watching it on YouTube, this is it here in real time with the smartphone holder that you can put your phone in. So every once in a while, again, if I'm recording a podcast and I want to, use a clip or something for my social media, please follow me at Sold by Marvin if you're interested, and follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. But it's a great light that you can use that, again, if you are not in a position where you can get good natural light like I'm able to, or if you want to, record some content after hours, you're going to want to invest in a good ring light. And this particular ring light also gives you the ability to dim it. So if you just need just enough light to, accentuate you can dial up or dial down the brightness. So that's. Are you a real estate agent looking to jumpstart your career? Join our online agent network and gain access to the support and resources you need to succeed. One of the most effective ways to attract clients in this industry is through social media. And I can tell you, in my entire time as a real estate professional, I have not knocked on one door, and yet I've still generated several $1 million worth of sales per year. And our team is here to help you do the same thing. Click the link in today's show notes today, or visit IamTheTribe.com to learn more about this amazing opportunity. Now back to the show. That's super dope. So again, highly recommend that. That's only $40. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right. So last thing I want to show you all that you'll want to add to your toolkit to start your podcast is the visual. All right. So you may ask yourself, well, Marvin, how do I get a picture, a video like what you have? Okay. I invested in a DSLR camera, and it's a Canon camera that I personally use. But this camera is pretty expensive. But again, I use it for a bunch of things. And again, it's all for business. So it was something that for me, the type of person that I am, I wanted my images I wanted it to look a very specific kind of way, almost like a movie, right? But if you don't have that kind of budget, that's okay. My favorite Logitech Brio 4K camera, that is my favorite web camera. I have this camera here in our office setup. This is my camera that I use for my Zoom calls. This is a camera that I use if for whatever reason my Canon here that I'm using for this podcast goes out. I use this all day because it is a 4K webcam. It gives you the ability, it has a built-in microphone on it as well. And this is like the number one camera that people use on Zoom. Literally, it is a very, very popular camera that people use for Zoom calls. So pick this up, add this to your toolkit. I think, all in, I think the mic was $99. This is $120. So now we're at $220. And then the lighting was $40. So all in, you're under $300, but you're able to build a podcast from scratch to start your business and really, really, really put yourself out there in a manner that a lot of real estate professionals, investors, they're just not doing this. They're not thinking about the importance of a podcast, and they're thinking in a very old school, traditional way. I got to put advertising on the side of a bus. I got to put advertising on a billboard, things of that nature. But if you are a tech-focused real estate professional and investor like I am, you realize that you got to go to where people are. And people may see your billboard for a few seconds while they're driving, right? But they won't have the time to write your number down, right? Because they're driving, right? People might see your advertisement on the side of a bus. But again, if they're driving past that bus, they're not going to have the time to copy your information. But what if someone was looking for subject matter that you decide to cover on a podcast because they searched it, and then they found your podcast, and now they're able to really get the questions answered, and they may even reach out to you to do business, to help them buy or sell their next home because you created a podcast such as the Living in Atlanta, Georgia podcast, for example. That's a great podcast idea where an individual could take their favorite things to do in the city and talk about it in a podcast. You could even bring on guests from other businesses, for example, in and around the city and have them tell their story. So now you've got endless content that you can create, a podcast where you are the local professional and you're talking to everyday business owners in your city about some of the amazing things that they do in the restaurants and the bars and all that jazz. I mean, that's a podcast idea that I'm thinking about I might do for myself. But this is just, you have no excuses. Again, if you want to get all the gear here that I mentioned, it's in the links in the description. All right. So now we need to talk about how to create our podcast for free. All right. And if you're getting value from this, please smash like. It's greatly appreciated. How I create my podcast for free, and I've done it for many, 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 many years, is through this platform here, my favorite platform that anybody can create their podcast on day one, and it is Anchor.fm. So Anchor.fm, now known as Spotify for podcasters, is where I got my start in the podcast game, okay? There are 1,000,001 places that you can start your podcast through, but your boy, your brother, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor, I'm about lowering the bar in the sense of removing excuses that will keep a person from starting today. If you wanted to create a podcast traditionally, you would have to go through one of the other podcast distribution outlets that are out there and pay them to host your podcast. But Anchor, which is now known as Spotify for podcasters, allows you to do it 100% free. I've used this for years, and it distributes my podcast to every major podcast outlet. And I'm talking about Apple Podcasts, Spotify, of course, and some of the other ones that are out there, Google Podcast, Overcast, Pocket Cast. These are all major hubs, specifically Apple Podcast and Spotify, that people use on a regular basis to listen to their favorite podcast. So why not put yourself in position to be able to do the same? So if I wanted to start the account, you have a bunch of creation tools that it offers here. And if you already have your own podcast out there, you can move it over to Spotify and save money on that if you're paying to have it hosted elsewhere. But it gives you a little bit of algorithmic information on the type of individuals that are listening to your podcast. So it helps you learn more about your audience so that you can create content that resonates with them. And you also have the ability to earn money from your podcast on day one. So the cool thing about Anchor is that you literally can start earning money from your video or your audio podcast on day one. And the great thing is that, and what I do is that I record my podcast on a video format, and it will give me the ability to upload that video directly to Spotify's podcast platform as a video podcast. But on every other outlet that's out there that it will distribute your information to, if they don't have a video version, then it will distribute the normal sound audio version of the podcast. So super cool. Add this place to your toolkit. Create your account ASAP. Again, you can host your podcast for free. It will distribute it to every major podcast outlet that's out there. And then you have the ability as well to record a podcast directly in the Spotify platform. So the steps to get everything going, very straightforward, very simple. You just click sign up, absolutely free. You click that you want to start a podcast, and then you'll create your account here. Let me see if I can try to create mine quickly, but let's see, what do I want to use here? Let me unshare quickly. All right, so I'll go and create my podcast right now. So all you got to do if you don't have an account is you just sign up for an account. And you just fill all this information out here by signing up. So let's sign up right now. All right, we'll share my registration info and sign me up. All right. All right, so we're logged in here. All right, so continue the app. Okay. So I ask you if you agree to terms and descriptions. Of course you do, because we don't ever read terms and descriptions, right? All right. So once you're in here, then all you got to do is it gives you the steps to create your podcast here. So you just follow the steps here. But what I want to show you again is just how easy it is to make your first episode, right? So we'll click make our first episode, and it gives me the ability to either drag and drop my own pre-recorded podcast. Again, you can use a number of different outlets. I would say maybe start using a platform like StreamYard. StreamYard is what I use to record video like this that I put out as a live stream. Use that, or you can use Zoom, for example, and just record a Zoom video, again, using all of the gear that I gave you earlier in this podcast. But if you want to record directly from Spotify for podcast, then you have the ability to do that. Then all you got to do when you're ready to start recording is you just click record. And it gives you the ability as well, if you want to add music to your podcast, if you want to put transitions in your podcast. I mean, you really can customize this thing and make it exactly what you want it to be. But again, if you don't have time for all that, right, then I would say just record your content on a place like Zoom or a place like, again, StreamYard. I like Zoom because everyone's familiar with Zoom, and it gives you the ability within Zoom to download the video. You also will have the ability to download the audio so that you can either upload the video and then it'll separate the audio for outlets that don't accept video podcasts as of yet. Spotify does, Spotify podcasts. But again, I'm big on being everywhere. So I would suggest that you consider doing video podcast and then distributing that video podcast to your normal audio podcast outlets. That's just my suggestion. But again, I want to lower the bar so that you get this stuff done today. All right. So check out Anchor, now known as Spotify for podcasters. That's how you can create your podcast absolutely free. Now, why do podcasts die? That's a great question. Podcasts die because many of us are not consistent in creating content. We do one video, we do one post on social media, and because it only gets 1 like or 2 likes, and those 2 likes came from your mom and dad, you decide content isn't for me, this podcast isn't for me, nobody's listening to it, so I'm just going to stop making podcasts. That is the worst thing that you could do as a content creator, because ultimately anything worth having will not happen quickly. Anything that is of significance, something that you literally have to build brick by brick, is never going to be a lightning fast situation, right? But because we live in a microwave society where people think that if they want a thing right now, they're supposed to get it right now, and they want 1 million subscribers, they want 1 million listeners to their podcast, so they're supposed to do it right now, it's supposed to happen right now. That's not how life works, okay? It's all about consistency and stick-to-itiveness, and by endeavoring into the podcast space, which is also a very crowded space, there's 1 million podcasts that are out there, you have to realize that even though there are 1 million people out there that create podcasts, you have something very unique to give to the world. And the only way that that's going to happen is by doing it consistently over a period of time. This podcast here, for example, the Equity Podcast, has gone through a few different name changes. It was called at one point the More Than a Real Estate Podcast, and then it was called something else, I forgot. And I have settled on the Equity Podcast because I'm all about building generational wealth, equity in business and investing, having a thing that I own that I can later sell should I choose to, or I can hold on to it for the rest of my life. But if I don't stay consistent in doing the work on a day-to-day basis, the podcast isn't going to go anywhere. The video isn't going to go anywhere. Your business isn't going to go anywhere. So you've got to have stick-to-itiveness and consistency, along with making sure that it looks as nice as possible as far as your podcast, if you decide to go the video route. And if you decide to stay on the audio side of things, making sure that it sounds as crisp as possible, like this podcast does, right? So we don't have 100,000 listeners per week on this podcast. Absolutely not. But you know what? I'm committed to this. I'm going to stick to it. And at some point, this podcast, if it's in the Lord's will become a top-rated business podcast. That is why I'm doing it. That is why I'm making sure that how it looks, how it sounds is on par or very close to being on par with the top podcasts that are out there, because I am future-proofing my business, this podcast platform. And again, I leverage this for a number of different things. I use this for lead generation. I use this to network with other agents. I use this to bring on coaching clients, things of that nature. So if I'm not presenting this thing to the best of my ability on a consistent basis, how in the heck am I going to sell someone else on why they should use me for free coaching, why they should join up with me so that they can learn how to become the best type of content creating real estate agent or real estate investor? How can that happen if I'm not doing it consistently? All right. So that is my thoughts as it relates to this thing. And if you get value and you got value from this, all I want you to do is to hit that thumbs up button and let me know when you start your podcast. Drop it in the link if you are watching this on YouTube. Shout out your podcast. I want to leave this to be an open platform for other real estate content creators that are out there that are watching this, that needed to know the tips, the tricks, the strategies, how they can start their podcast, because they didn't even know that Anchor, now known as Spotify for podcasters, was even out there, that create content and distribute it to all the big boys, Apple and all that jazz, absolutely free, right? They didn't know where to find a microphone that is not going to cost them an arm and a leg. Well, now you know how to find that. We've taken care of that. The gear that you need, the link to all of them is in the description of this video. So now we've eliminated all of the excuses. The only thing required at this point is for you to get after it. So I always tell people, And I'll close on this point. The game, for the most part, is going to always be free. Now, what you do with that game determines the cost that you pay. So if you execute on it and you're able to build $1 million podcast, a multi-million-dollar podcast, like $1 million worth of game, for example, then I've done my job. But if you don't execute on it and you come up with an excuse or some self-limiting belief, well, the cost for you is going to be what you've missed out on by not executing on this information. The opportunity cost, if you will, is what you missed out on by not pushing past your insecurities, pushing past your self-limiting beliefs, and creating the content that someone out there is waiting for you to create. All right, until the next podcast, this is your brother, your uncle, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor, tapping in, wishing you all a fantastic day. Talk to you on this podcast.